Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sasha Chilkova. I am marketing manager here at Witham. And today we're joined by our own cybersecurity team. We have a few team members from Capital One, and as well as some cybersecurity and data privacy experts from McElroy Deutsch. We'll be talking about cybersecurity, data privacy, and insurance, and how to make sure that you're covered in all those areas. First, I'll take care of a few housekeeping items. Just a reminder that this is a CPE session that qualifies for 1 credit in information technology. In order to be eligible for the credit, be sure that you participate in the 4 polls that we have scattered throughout the presentation. And then there's also a survey at the closing of the session that you need to fill out as well. And then the Witham team will provide you a certificate of the CPE credit within 30 days from today. Otherwise, we are recording the webinar. We'll be able to provide a link to the recording as well as the slide deck, hopefully later this afternoon to everybody. And then lastly, please don't hold back your questions. We'll try to address them all at the end, but throughout the session, you can submit them in the questions pane of the GoToWebinar panel. And if we don't get to questions, maybe we'll respond to them by email. And with that, I think Ed from Capital One has a few opening remarks, so we're ready for you to get started.
Thanks, Sasha. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our cybersecurity webinar today. My name is Edward DeWalters, and I'm a business banker with Capital One Bank. I'm joined by my colleagues, Louis Corrales, Ray Walcott, and Pierre Gerges to kick off today's event. I'm also honored to co-host today's call with Witham's Cyber and Information Security team and members of McElroy, Deutsch, Mulvaney, and Carpenter's Cybersecurity, Data Protection, and Privacy Group. To start off today's webinar, I want to share a few comments from our bank's fraud research team. The average bank fraud event, whether electronic or check, cost the average business $114,000. That is outside of the time and effort with filing police reports, opening new bank accounts, reissuing checks, setting up new ACH agreements, and contacting all those payees affected. As technology continuously changes and upgrades, it's no surprise that cybercrime and fraud are on the rise just as quickly. How do business owners proactively protect themselves to avoid such headaches? Capital One Bank offers several fraud protection services. Oftentimes, business owners state, "It will never happen to me." Fact is, it's not a matter of if it will happen, but when. So I ask you this, when was the last time your bank recommended fraud protection services to protect your banking relationship? If they haven't, I ask you, why not? I, along with my colleagues, are happy to follow up with you after today's call. Thanks again for joining us. Now let me turn it over to Matthew Ferrante to start our session, and thanks again. Matt?
All right, thank you. My name is Matt Ferrante. I'm the partner in charge of the Witham Cyber team, at least for today. Thank you for joining us today. Again, I'm a former top electronic crime special agent for the U.S. Secret Service with specialized training in cybersecurity, offensive, defensive type of hacking, high-tech investigations, and much more. Let's dispel a common myth. We always see the image of the hacker with the hoodie on, hacking behind a computer. No, I'm not hacking right now, but this is not correct. They don't wear, I've arrested plenty of hackers. They don't wear hoodies. They don't wear the dark sunglasses, so I can take the hoodie off. As far as the sunglasses go, as Secret Service agents, they do wear the sunglasses, not just because they're cool, but actually it's thwarted a lot of assassination attempts, especially with people suffering from schizophrenia. They actually believed that the agents were staring at them, and they actually didn't go ahead with the potential assassination attempt because they thought they were looking, they thought the agents were looking at them. But today we are going to speak about some really scary stuff. I'm talking cyber lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my, I'm talking about some really important stuff that's going to potentially impact you, but not to scare anyone, and to put everyone in a bit of a festive mood, I am going to put on my Cyber Kitty hat, put everyone in a little bit of a holiday spirit, because there is a lot of stuff going on. Let's move forward to the next type of slide. We're going to start with the disclaimer. All right, we love our lawyers. I love our lawyers too. We have some really great lawyers that are going to speak today about data privacy, cyber insurance. So, but let's get to our next polling question. And yes, it's real.
Thanks, Matt. So first polling question is, which is the cereal choice of hackers? Cocoa Puffs, Kix, Count Chocula, or Captain Crunch? So thank you for voting. We're looking like it's tied between Cocoa Puffs and Captain Crunch. Give it a second more for people to vote. Oh, still kind of tied. All right, so the leading answer is Captain Crunch. Are they right, Matt?
Absolutely, Captain Crunch. Great. Starting in the early 1960s, Captain Crunch cereal box contained a plastic whistle meant to replicate the whistle used by sailing officials to signal meal times or other commands. Early hackers used this whistle to play certain tones through their telephones to bypass AT&T's analog system and get free long-distance phone calls. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the cyber team that we have. We do IT managed services, security, incident response, cyber forensics. So we practice what we preach. We're not going to be here today and say, hey, this is what we found on Google. This is what you guys should be doing. We actually run full infrastructure end to end. And in terms of data privacy, compliance, if you have compliance rules, you have internal policies. If your security controls don't align to that, you're going to get yourself in trouble. So if you make policies, you have to make sure your security controls adhere to that. In terms of the team, it's not just about me. We got folks from the private sector, a lot of former military folks from U.S. Central Command, U.S. Air Force, Navy. It is a battlefield in cyber, 100%. It's an absolute battlefield. We got great expertise. And by the way, great expertise. We're going to have Eric Jackson talk today. We talked about the lawyers. Eric Jackson, former military, we got former military folks. So if you have any questions, please, this is what the expertise here is here for, technical or not. We see cyber attacks increase across all areas. That's what we're seeing. So we don't just focus in one sector. We see it across all the different niches, from finance to healthcare to manufacturing. Let me say one thing about finance industry. I helped transform Barclays security globally, for example. Finance people are really proud about their security infrastructure. I will tell you, ego is not your amigo. You're going to get hit. The expertise across different sectors, you see one sector getting hit, usually it's going to spill over to another sector. Automotive industry, yeah, automotive. Each new vehicle coming off the line, each new vehicle you get today has 3 IP addressed to them. You need to think of vehicles as computers with wheels. That's what's going on today. E-commerce, it really has went into the e-commerce side. We see an explosive growth in that. Guess what? The attacks are following that as well. So what is the new normal? Is anything normal today? I don't feel too normal today. I've been sitting behind a desk. I really have the urge to travel. But new normal is previously unfamiliar or atypical situation that has become standard, usual, or expected. If I was to go back 10 years and say this is what cyber landscape would be today, this is what would be going on today as the new normal, they would think I'm nuts. Maybe you think I'm nuts, but I'm telling you what's going on today in cyber is absolutely crazy. Since COVID-19 and the pandemic began, we saw phishing websites increase by 350%. Banks, 238% increase in cyber attacks. Ransomware attacks increased by 148%. Everyone knows ransomware attacks. That's the new norm, right? That's assuming that attacker is after your money. They're not always after your money. There's different motivators. You got internal threats. That's right. No, a lot of people don't like to talk about that, as well as external threat. We see the average ransomware demand increase by 33%. Off-the-shelf ransomware can be purchased for a mere $800. So why wouldn't somebody go into cybercrime? It's profitable. By the way, you can't always just pay the ransom. There may be penalties, or the feds may actually go after you, the victim, because you may have transferred money to either North Korea or Iran or other places where you shouldn't be transferring money. So be careful in terms of just paying the ransom. Okay, first line of defense, we talk about our people. Yeah, God help us, all right? Everyone talks about training. They're gonna say training is really important. It is, but it's about people, process, technology, validation and verification that those controls actually work. Phishing attacks increased 667%. So if your training just is about, hey, don't click on this, guess what? Someone's going to click on it. We have attackers using AI integration, that's artificial intelligence, to build phishing, to get by your defenses. So they're actually, think about what ransomware is and AI. They're actually taking the technology, your technology, and using it against you. Remote workforce metrics, they're up. People are producing. We got people working really hard, but they've also did a poll of respondents working internally for organizations. 54% of the respondents said that they can engage in nefarious activities and get away with it simply because they're working from home. Why do we see all these cyber attacks? Below, we talk about an attack surface. What's an attack surface? An attack surface is the sum of different points where unauthorized users can potentially access systems data and exfiltrate data from the environment. Keeping an attack surface as small as possible is a basic fundamental principle of effective security. So below, that was about a quarter the size before COVID-19. After COVID-19, that's one of the client's attack surface. We see all those different points as potential areas that can be compromised. Cybersecurity stats and facts. This is the cybercrime economy in profits. When I mean organized crime is run as a business, as a effective business. Look at these metrics, 6 trillion by 2021. Ransomware attacks occurring 14 seconds, every 11 seconds by 2021. We're getting these every day. I know Eric Jackson, I'm going to talk to him later, he's on my team. Some reason, Friday, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, bam, we hear it. I mean, something is definitely going on because we see these attacks nonstop occurring, and they're becoming more and more frequent. We're not talking about, someone being out for, a day or so. We're talking about potentially companies being out for over a month. We worked the cyber attack. We came in later on behalf of the insurance. On behalf of the insurers, they were out for over 4 weeks. A lot of companies, they're out of business permanently. Top country target, the United States, no surprise. This is what the estimated cost of a record exposed. Average cost of a data breach, $8 million. Okay, it's going up and up and up, and that depends on what area. If you're in healthcare, it's going to be even higher. What's the average cost of a cyber crime toolkit? $1. So it's very, very cheap to orchestrate these type of attacks. Okay, cyber attacks, we're talking about them increasing 600%. So you're talking about a massive amount of attack. It's not just about data loss. That's right. When we say fire the lasers, we mean it. High orbital ion cannon. We talked about these low-cost tools. You can don't do it. You can download this tool. It's very easy. You can knock a website out, knock a business out very easy. There's also a low orbital ion cannon. My son's like, hey, Dad, how do I get my hands on this? No. You don't want to do this. So don't handle this type of stuff. What's the result after these type of things are fired? Look at the data on the bottom. This is just recent. We just got this in. Major global company out. I mean, I'm talking out, down for the count, and they are scrambling. So we talk about appropriate assessments. Eric Jackson's going to talk about them later. Trust but verify, or even better, zero trust architecture. We can talk, Eric can talk about some of those things later on during the presentation. What's the modern warfare today? Bullets. We all know what bullets do. We all know the impact. Cyber, this is the new bullets today. It is in the form of packets, real impacts in the environment. They're hitting your environment day in and day out. Critical things, it's not just about data loss. It's about confidentiality, availability, and the integrity of your network. Confidentiality, I don't have to tell you about all the different data breaches occurring today. They're massive. Confidential data, trade secrets being lost from environments. We see it all the time. Most companies don't even know what they're supposed to be protecting. By the way, you have a trade secret, you want to keep it a trade secret, and to remain a trade secret, once it's out there in the wild, it's no longer a trade secret. So think about that, what your losses would be if you're hit by an impact. Data integrity, they're going after your backups. So even if you think you have effective backups, if they're poisoned, and we've seen this happen time and time again, you're not going to be able to restore your data. So that's the integrity of the system. Availability, what's happening with the availability? Everyone's running to the cloud. The cloud's going to solve all the problems. Just because Amazon's secure, just because Microsoft is secure, does not mean that you are secure. Okay, cloud simply means somebody else's computer. Incident response, I love our government people. I'm a former government people. They're not going to solve your problems. If you believe government's going to solve your problems, especially during impact, don't hold your breath, especially when your business is down. A lot of times government's there to kick down the doors, or there's chalk around the bodies and they're dealing with the aftermath. So think about that. Yes, I'm not saying don't report it, but you should really think about getting legal privilege assigned, and then making sure that your business is up and running. Cyber insurance, we'll talk a little bit about cyber insurance. A lot of people are running to it. Cyber insurance, we had, for example, we worked on behalf of the insurers. By the way, we're experts. We testified Southern District of New York, Eastern District of New York. Major cyber claim, $2 billion what the insurers are at risk. They hired us, we picked apart the environment, we found out that they were negligent and reckless, meaning the people who were impacted, they got less than $40 million. There's misaligned expectations with cyber insurance. We can assist. and help them prior to, if you have a cyber insurance policy now and after. And by the way, you get a cyber insurance policy, they call their people in. Who are they representing? Are they representing the insurers, or are they representing you? So be careful out there. It's dangerous. This is the new Cold War, and it's all about your data. Believe me, it's all about your data, and you can be impacted and be knocked off. These are the modern business threats today. Very important. And I listed here government, competitors, regulatory. Business is about making money. Government's not always going to be your friend. These regulatory impacts and sanctions are going to increase. Now handing it off to the lawyers for their slides. They got, listen to what they're saying. They got a lot of great information. Thank you.
Thanks. I have good news for you. Privacy law compliance, compared to what we have been hearing, is a piece of cake. It's not rocket science. And yet, so in a somewhat anticlimactic opening, we have to ask ourselves why, despite the fact that privacy law compliance is not rocket science, we still see a lot of compliance failures, perhaps more than in other areas. Oh, I have.
Sorry, I think we were launching our second poll here.
Okay, very good.
That's okay.
But that's something we should ask people after my lecture. Anyway, which of the following agencies is active in the area of consumer privacy enforcement? The SEC, the FDA, the FTC, or the EPA?
All right, just giving people a few more seconds to vote here to make sure everybody gets their vote in. It looks like an overwhelming amount believe it's the FTC. Just going to give it a few more seconds. I think it's the SEC. All right, looks like the winning answer here is the FTC. Is that correct, Christian?
Yes, it is.
All right, thanks everybody for voting.
Even though the SEC also focuses on more recently in its disclosure requirements and compliance requirements on data security risks and so forth, but the FTC is certainly the prime regulator in this field. Anyhow, so why do privacy compliance failures occur? For one, people have no understanding or no adequate understanding of what data they're actually processing. Data is different. Perhaps it is less tangible than an inventory or book entries for accounting. And also organizations still treat data quite in a siloed approach, meaning that only the marketing people know that certain data are shared with other parties, whereas only IT know actually what data you really have. And if these groups are not talking to each other and there is no organization there to force to integrate that, then you have a problem. If you don't know what data you're processing, you may be unaware of the fact that you have 50,000 or more visitors who are California residents on your website. And by that reason, if you are doing business in California, meaning you have one sales account there, then you're liable to comply with the California Consumer Privacy Act. Also, how many companies were unaware of the fact that they were processing biometric data as defined under the Illinois statutes and found themselves in court? Pretty much the same applies to the regulatory landscape. As we already mentioned, there is no overall privacy statute on the federal level, so companies, with the exception of the banking and the health industry sector, if HIPAA and so forth. So most respondents have to look at their state legislators, at state attorney generals, and regional enforcement agencies. Again, if you're unaware of the requirements, for example, of the Illinois statute, then you won't be realizing that you're processing data that are considered biometric data. Or if you're not aware of the requirements of COPPA, despite the fact that you're not targeting your services at children, you may be surprised that you're still liable to comply with COPPA under certain circumstances. So ignorance is not bliss in this set of circumstances. There is also a third set of reasons that we have encountered in our practice, what we call institutional idiosyncrasies, where companies have spent a lot of money on a data infrastructure and an IT department. They have a legal team, and yet they may be even public companies, and it doesn't work. Typically, we see smaller entities being particularly vulnerable to that, but also larger entities that experienced an asymmetric growth. Do you have any insights that you want to share on this point?
No, not beyond the obvious, which is, I mean, the more important the proprietary the information is, the more media coverage that you get, the more that your employees are active on social media, then the more vulnerable, or at least the bigger a target you're going to be. So it's better to, sort of be very discreet about what you've got, what you're working on, and your people should be signing confidentiality agreements.
Okay, next slide. As I already mentioned, we don't have an overarching federal privacy law, and therefore the need to comply with a multitude of different regulatory requirements may overtax the capabilities of particularly smaller entities. So our recommendation is, and here's a bit of good news, the basic requirements, the core requirements of most privacy regulations and privacy statutes are fairly similar. So it's our advice, if you cannot do it properly and follow every law in every respect, it would be a better approach to invest into a scalable multi-jurisdictional approach and sort of compliance by triangulation and trying to get the basics right. Next. Organizations are run by people. Therefore, the most important thing in a smaller organization is to find the right person on the C-level to spearhead the organization of the privacy office, of the privacy organization of the entity. If you want to ensure a more effective deployment of your privacy infrastructure, there should be a multi-layered privacy organization within your entity. It is also important to foster and create a culture of privacy, where privacy is not considered an obstacle to maximizing business, but as a differentiator that may actually enhance your profitability and make you more successful in the market. Appropriate KPIs that focus, among other things, also on privacy law compliance and data security compliance, particularly on the second tier of the privacy organization, may help to achieve that. Next. If you don't do anything and have nothing else in place, invest into getting a top-notch, well-written privacy notice for your website and for your written documentation. This is your calling card in the area of privacy compliance. And if people just on a very primitive level, if you the absence of a privacy notice or a very odd or aggressive privacy notice is likely to attract regulatory scrutiny or plaintiffs bar scrutiny much more than if you have a very good privacy notice in place that is actually not full of legalese, but written in a way that people actually can understand it, and also that reflects more or less truthfully your privacy practices, building in principles like transparency, notice, and choice, sort of fair processing principles, help make this privacy notice viable under multiple regulatory schemes, be it CCPA or also in terms of measuring your compliance with Section 5 of the FTC Act. The FTC actually considers the failure to disclose your privacy practices as an offense, and you may find yourselves in the crosshair of regulatory enforcement there. Privacy, and that's perhaps one of the most important function of a good privacy notice, is that it can also serve as a checklist against your actually. So it's kind of, instead of policy mapping policy to notice, you're mapping notice to policy. The privacy notice is if it's well written and comprehensive, it's a very good checklist when you go out and in a small organization and check, so what is it that we're really doing? What data are we collecting? For what purposes? Who do we share the data with? And that is sort of the backbone of your compliance documentation. Next. Obviously, I would be carrying coals to Newcastle to tell you that you have to invest in a professional risk assessment of your security risk. Obviously, the next, again, after the first presentation, I think I don't have to work on convincing you to adopt reasonable security measures, except of saying that failure to do so is also a problem with the FTC. And despite the fact, this picture of the gentleman in the first slide was perhaps not the most flattering, but most people are unaware of the sophistication of social engineering and phishing. And investing into something that is really state of the art and gives people at least a glimpse as to what's possible in this area as far as human and social engineering is possible, is really, it is not eliminating a risk, but it is certainly a measure to contain the risk. Next. Compliance is an incremental process. Many chief legal officers or CPOs in large companies say, okay, I'm happy with 80% if I want to convince them to do more. So if you have limited, which is typically the case, particularly in smaller organizations, and you're not regulated under HIPAA or as a financial service, then you should adopt a strategic approach to your compliance. What, for example, if the adoption of a data protection officer, which can be easily verified from paper records, is something that gets you more into compliance, then I would spend the money there. Whereas, if your internal process and procedures are 100% compliant, is something that perhaps you will address in due time. Also, the important question is to understand what the regulatory policies of your primary regulators are. What are the enforcement priorities? Is there a leniency program? What are the criteria to qualify for that? Are there cure periods? So if there's, for example, like in California, a 30-day cure period, and there are certain things you simply cannot get around to doing, then, but you can do it within certain days, then that would be an aspect. And also, all politics is local, and so is compliance. So if you choose a lawyer or a security consultant, it should be someone who actually is around in the local professional organizations, who knows people at the Attorney General's office, not to approach them improperly, but simply to know their mindset, and also a lawyer or a security practitioner who has been there and has a certain personal credibility can improve your lot significantly if it comes to discussions about a consent decree, for example. Yeah, and now I'm handing it over to Brad, who is going to scare you a little bit more by talking about civil litigation exposure in that context. Brad? Brad, you're on mute. Brad, you're muted.
Christian, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, I got it. I got it. Thank you. So, sorry about that. So, let me get the. Oh, we're talking about, so the trend, there's been a trend towards courts finding that there's a common law duty to protect data and from data breaches, and a common law duty to use reasonable security measures. So if you're breached, you could have class action tort suits for negligence from consumers, and businesses may also face such litigation under other theories, just breach of contract, breach of fiduciary duty, consumer fraud in the event of a cybersecurity incident. And for publicly traded entities, a cybersecurity incident, especially if it impacts revenue or stock prices or reputation, could lead to class action shareholder derivative suits against directors or officers, alleging that they didn't use due care in creating reasonable security measures and compliance with regulations. I can get to the next poll.
All right, let's see here. So multiple insurance have taken the position that cyber attacks are not covered by cyber insurance if they're perpetrated by which of the following parties: organized crime syndicates, terrorist organizations, foreign governments, or employees. That's an interesting one. I'm not sure that I know either. Let's see. Give people some time to vote. So the majority now is saying employees. The runner-up is foreign governments. That would be my guess. Interesting. And then some people are saying organized crime syndicates. Just give people a few more seconds to get their votes in. The employees answer is winning. Brad, what's the correct response here?
Foreign governments.
Oh, wow. That's a good one. That was an 18% guess. So great question. Okay.
Yeah, so cyber insurance.
Lead us over to cyber insurance. I guess, Dai, do you want to take it?
Yeah, so let's just talk about insurance for a minute. So as everybody's made clear on this, event thus far, there's only so much you can do to mitigate your risk. You've got major players like the government and major corporations who specialize in security being hacked. So your only then response to that is, since you can only mitigate it so far, you've got to shift it. And there's a cost-benefit analysis that needs to go into this, because regardless of how well, protected, quote unquote, you think you are, and how much money you want to spend, it's impossible for private sector companies to spend the kind of money and resources on protecting themselves from state actors, which a lot of these major headline grabbing, attacks have been. But even if they're not major headline grabbing, there's also just a lot of theft going on, and it's all backed by, governments, bad actors that are very much more financed and very much more funded than U.S. corporations are. So it is a losing battle, I think, has been shown time and time and time again, that you're going to be able to protect yourself adequately from external threats. Okay, so you cannot mitigate it down to zero. So if you can't do that, then you've got to shift it. And the shifting is the insurance. And I think that most middle market companies, I think the stats now are middle market, 71% of middle market businesses reported having some form of cyber insurance in place, but only 17% of small businesses reported having some sort of a cyber insurance in place. And that is unfathomable to us, that you would, not have adequate protection in place, because it's cost effective, and it completely shifts the risk if the policies are done right. So just at a high level, there's first party risk and there's third party risk. First party risk is the policies protect you, and third party risk is the policies protect third parties so that they don't sue you for your risk. So first party is damage caused to your company, to your employees, to your systems, to your network. Third party is your customers, your vendors, your employees, so that they're covered, so they don't turn around and sue you. So it's first party, third party. And I think, sort of most cyber insurance policy is going to cover, most of it's going to cover identity theft, or at least some of it can involve identity theft. You'd like to have that. If you could get on a personal plan as a rider, or a specific endorsement to an existing company plan, getting a identity theft plan would be a great way to do this, because this would cover you on income protection and expense reimbursement associated with recovering your identity, restoring your credit history, and legal action against the thieves to the extent that you can identify them. Stats show that most businesses are not back to normal operations for at least 1 month after an attack. So the company needs to have adequate cyber insurance, in addition to the owners of the company having identity theft protection. And the coverage is going to start with the kind of data you collect and store on your customers and your employees: credit card, bank account numbers, social security, driver's license numbers, addresses, and phone numbers. A basic coverage plan for a small business is going to cover breach notification, credit and fraud monitoring services, the costs associated with hiring a PR firm, and the cost of restoring and recreating your data. But you need to have that in place, because you're going to get hit with each stage of that. And Matt and I, with them, and I have both seen that in every single incident. Even if it wasn't a full breach, it was just an incident, but you're going to go through all of those stages anyway. If you're in a regulated industry, beyond the risk management, data loss mitigation and prevention, incident response, you're going to have third-party legal and regulatory costs. This means the policies need to scale. So what worked for you 3 or 5 years ago probably needs to be updated. And most major insurers, most of the carriers have educated their agents and brokers on cyber, and the agents and the brokers should be talking to you as your business grows, on CGL, the casualty and general liability side. They should all be should be talking to you about the growth on the cyber side too, because as you get bigger, as you take on more data, the policy needs to, to cover that. And that's really, in a nutshell, that's really the major things you should be looking for.
Thank you, Diane. One other thing is that cyber insurance may be causing a spike in ransomware, since cyber criminals may believe that cyber insurance that potentially covers ransom payments will lead insured to quickly pay the demanded ransom. So that's something to bear in mind. Another thing is the act of war exception, which we mentioned earlier. Insurance policies typically contain an exception for acts of war. Well, that's going back to like World War II, where you had the German Air Force, Luftwaffe, was bombing factories that were insured in London and Liverpool. Some insurers have taken the position that a cyber attack perpetrated by a foreign government is an act of war, like the NotPetya one ransomware attack, which the US and UK governments publicly blamed on Russia. The insurers took that position and denied coverage. The insurers sued, and that's still being litigated, and those cases are pending, so it remains to be seen how courts will interpret that. And that could be more problematic since the line between organized crime and cybercrime syndicates and governments can be very murky when you're talking about countries like Russia and Iran. Moreover, a lot of these incidents are perpetrated by foreign governments like North Korea, Iran, and Russia now. Another thing is that there's a recent Indiana Court of Appeals decision holding that a cyber insurance policy covering property loss does not pay the ransom paid to a hacker. That case is now up on appeal to the Indiana Supreme Court, so it remains to be seen how other courts are going to address that issue. So that may leave you without coverage or reimbursement if you pay the ransom. So that's another thing to bear in mind, in addition to the possibility that you could have legal issues if you're sending money to someone who's on an OFAC sanction list, just North Korea, who's perpetrated the ransomware attack.
Okay.
All right, everybody. How you doing? I'm Eric Jackson with some cyber practice. I am a military trained former hacker and moved into finance after the military as a computer security expert. Ran a bunch of security programs for various companies dealing in finance, life and safety, and education. Up first, we're gonna do a poll question real quick.
All right. Last poll. Which of the following is a good password? Scorpions. Here I am spelled out creatively. Rock you, or like a hurricane. Good question, Eric. I'm giving people a few more seconds here. It looks like number 2, here I am, is winning by a landslide, but so is like a hurricane is creeping up behind that one. And then a couple of people answered scorpions. So which one is it, Eric?
So believe it or not, it is like a hurricane. And if anybody gets a joke on the question, extra credit to you. So A and C are terrible. I think we can all agree to that. Computers can break that in about 5 seconds. They can literally just guess it in 3 to 5 seconds. The here I am one is technically a decent password. It's short and it has special characters and everything, but it encourages people to write things down. People are going to forget whether or not they put in a 3 or an E, whether or not it has an exclamation point. So they're going to write stuff down. The last one, which is a very simple sentence, has spaces, has a period, has capital letters, has lowercase letters. It would take 2 to 10 years for a computer to randomly guess that. So that's the better password. And basically the whole idea here is security comes from good practice and vigilance, right? So passwords and policies related to passwords are good practice. But all of it, no matter how good your practice is, it requires a good deal of vigilance. And no matter where you sit in an organization, you need to be aware of what your security posture looks like. What is the things that are going to get you? Right here is an example of some client network closets we've looked at. We joke around that if you want to know what your security looks like, go look at your network closet. If it looks like this, it's not good. It's really simple. If whoever's maintaining your network has a closet that looks like this, they're not maintaining your security any better. This is the easy part. Gated cables will look pretty. It's actually fairly serious stuff, and we found that every time we run into a client with this, it's always really bad. And so the solution is let's move it all to the cloud. The cloud's great, and it'll fix a problem. It really literally just takes that really ugly closet, it puts it on somebody else's plate. It's still your problem, but now you can't see it anymore. There's no closet to go look in, but it's still there. Vigilance is always key. We need to know what we don't know, and security assessments, good third-party people looking at your security is the key to getting a good view on your security, so that you're not just assuming it's okay. We've run into quite a few clients who have been compromised and don't know it, and there's a couple of these are examples related to that. This is an example of one of our automotive clients. They were being attacked by Iran for a good long period of time, just bleeding data all over the place. And if you listen to the lawyers as they were talking, that's bad news. It's bad news for everybody involved: clients, the customers, the enterprise themselves. And they didn't know until they asked us. They said, something weird's happening. Can you guys take a look at it? We did an assessment and we found that they were bleeding data to Iran. And this was state sanctioned. If you looked at what they were talking about earlier, state sanctioned attack, don't rely on your cyber insurance for that to be the solution. As a quick aside, just Eric's personal belief on cyber insurance, it's not security. If you have an organization and you have a security program, cyber insurance should not be part of your security program. It should be when all else fails, at least we have cyber insurance. It's just like saying I wear a seatbelt even though I have car insurance. Another example, different client, automotive industry again, same thing. There was a Russian group that infiltrated their network, and these were all the programs that were running on their network, exfiltrating data, using their resources sometimes. We talk about competing business models. They don't want to pay for server space, so they'll use your enterprise's server space to conduct their operations, whatever they are, even if it's just stealing copyrighted material from other people. This last one is a big one. This was a tri-state hospital who approached us and said, hey, something weird has happened. Can you guys take a look at it? We got on the network and we looked around, and it turned out that they had been compromised by Iran. What was really interesting about this was that something weird that had happened was one of their HR people got phished. And every organization, everybody on this call, especially in a leadership position, knows you've had somebody get phished. And the IT guy goes, it's probably okay, don't worry about it. You know, we caught it. We know that they got phished. That's exactly what happened here. 2 or 3 days later, they're like, it's still acting really weird. We got on there, and it turned out that Iran had opened a channel and very quietly hidden from all interaction so that they couldn't see it until professionals came in and found it. In the case of this, I'll come back to this slide because I do want to get to the case of this. They lost 5 terabytes of data. 5 terabytes of data is equivalent to 375 million paper pages. Whether or not it was really that much data, it doesn't really matter. Let's take 1 0 off of that. It's 37.5 million pages. It's a lot of data that they lost. They had very little security. They had open guest Wi-Fi. They basically had everything wrong that you could have from a security perspective. But when we talked to them, they thought their security was okay. They weren't overly paranoid about it. And in cases like that, we went and looked. They had passwords that existed since 2010. Never been changed. They had no idea what they were. And when we did an assessment, we talked about passwords earlier, how easy they are to break. Everyone was in that 5-second category. We were able to break every single password in 5 seconds on that enterprise. Moreover, they didn't patch their gear, which is something that most people on this call are not super cognizant of. You might be aware of patching your computer, but everything needs patches, everything needs updating. In this case, when our penetration testers assessed the network, they were able to take over the switch that was unpatched and had the whole network in a matter of minutes. So it's just one of those things that when we talk about vigilance and we talk about security, there's so many facets of it that we all need to be aware of because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know what we don't know. This is just more examples of things that have gone wrong that we have seen in these various, especially in the new normal with COVID. People sharing computers with their family members. If your enterprise issues computers to home users, make sure you have a solid policy about how they're supposed to use those computers. We do see this a lot where people let their kids do their homework on their work computers after hours. And it makes for some really exciting security events that are very confusing for everybody involved as kids are doing what kids do on professional grade laptops and sending emails, all kinds of strange stuff. Remember, like PII and things that were mentioned, especially in the earlier talks, anything that is important needs to have protections around it. And we always ask when we do a security assessment is, how are you securing blank, whether it's PII? They say, oh, well, we have it on a server. There should be a specific answer related to security. And no matter where you sit in the position, you should be cognizant of the security program that's in place. In this case, PII left exposed. It's incredibly frequent when we do security assessments that we find PII, HIPAA data, PCI data on someone's desktop in their email box. And this kind of stuff is going to, that the lawyers here can tell you, is really, really bad news. Never mind the security ramifications of it. Another thing that we have that we like to always point out to companies and enterprises, we talk about all things we've gone through, is what do you do when there's an incident? When something happens, what is your reaction and what is the plan for when it happens? If you look at the case where we're talking about with the HR person who clicked on a phishing email, their reaction was to delete the email. They're like, there, we did it, instant response complete. 3 days later, it turned out it very much wasn't, and they were having a whole lot of problems. So you need to have a well-defined incident response plan and definitely vet it through people who understand security. A note that's not on here, but one that I always like to point out, kind of like cyber insurance, is IT people are intensely valuable, but never confuse your IT people for your security people. A lot of companies have great IT staff and they're dual hatting as security personnel. They're too busy for that. Security is its own discipline, and you definitely need to have some sort of vigilance, some sort of third party or oversight looking at that kind of stuff if you can't staff a security department. Super easy things. If you're that LAN closet I showed you with the spaghetti cabling in it, if that room can just be walked into by anybody, you have a major problem. That's another thing to keep in mind. If anybody from anywhere can walk in and access your computers physically, they can do whatever they want. And if you remember Matt talking earlier about insider threats come from that kind of thing. People walk in and take hard drives containing credit card numbers, incredibly valuable data, trade secrets. And finally, super easy stuff that we run into a lot is like antivirus and malware control, how you allow people to access the internet from your enterprise. All these things need to be controlled. You need some variety of vigilance to make sure that those things are being watched and controlled. And again, as we talk about the whole theme of this, if you think you're secure, you're probably not. It's best to know. You need to know for sure. More of the fines we have, again, no AV. We see very frequently, if you have a lot of data that's very important to you, you need to have controls in place to monitor the movement of that data. If you're in the financial industry, and I spent a lot of time with a large financial, we had software everywhere to make sure that if a credit card number was seen on somebody's computer, we knew about it. If a bank account was seen on somebody's computer, we knew about it. Everything that happened, we were watching to make sure that data did not leave on accident. So it's definitely something to keep in mind as you look at the different things in your security. You say, yeah, we're probably secure. No business continuity plan, incident response plan. We talk about incident response, business continuity just as well. Matt pointed out that hackers are an industry, and one of their favorite things is to take away your ability to operate and then charge you to allow you to operate again. If you have a business continuity plan, you are not beholden to the hackers. If you don't, you will be, and we see that all the time. You could pick anything in the news right now about hackers. These are companies going down real hard and paying very large ransoms to get their business back. And finally, Matt, do you want to take this slide?
Yeah, I kind of, you can hear me now? Great.
Loud and clear.
Awesome. How do you protect your business before the downpour? I always say this during each presentation. Noah built the ark before it rained, not after. Running threat emulation. If you have not done a penetration test, which is different than a threat emulation, penetration test just looks for vulnerabilities. Just says, hey, this is an open port. Modern cyber assessments, you do a threat emulation, you actually hire guys like us to actually see if they can hack the environment both from the outer perimeter and the inner perimeter. That's threat emulation, aka red teaming. VCCO or VCCO, Virtual Chief Compliance Officer, analysis of the security framework. You have policies, procedures, regulatory requirements, align that to the security control framework. Business continuity and incident preparedness. I can't tell you, I think it's about the rough estimate is about 70 to 75% of backups fail when they're needed most. And we talked about the poisoning of those backups. Running business continuity, incident response preparedness in conjunction with cyber people like us, in conjunction with legal counsel and other stakeholders. It's not just about ITS stakeholders, maybe the CFO. The CFO should be involved as well. Data privacy review and analysis, cyber insurance review and analysis. Look at those type of materials. We've also worked on the class action side. We work defending companies. We also worked on the class action side. It's people like us will pick apart your environment, say, if we're working on behalf of class action lawyers and say, look, you have these policies and procedures, you're really not aligning it, and you can actually help build a case. If you're collecting logs and other metrics, those can be used against you if you're not effectively addressing those incidents as they occur. The other thing that's important, seek additional advice on available services from Capital One. I mean, Capital One clients, they got some great, fraud protection controls. Look at those type of stuff. But really important, run the threat emulations, run the data privacy review and analysis prior to impacts happening. It's a matter of time. You're gonna have impacts. I talked about those packets hitting your environment left and right. You're gonna have impacts. If you can control and contain those impacts well before they occur. Again, the impacts, it's not just about paying a ransom. They may not be involved, they may not want ransomware payments. They may just want your environment to go down. And be mindful, and we've seen this. Some people just want to watch the world burn, and that could be your environment. Protect your environment. You have the fiduciary duty to do so as well. All right. Oh, really important, just real quick on this one, on the persistent scanning of your environment. The new thing is not to do periodic penetration tests where it's done every quarterly or 6 months, every year. Have it done continuously, right? Stay protected. We actually deploy devices. They actually continually monitor the environment to look for data, look at data flows, look at stuff that's happening to your environment. What's better to say that you're being protected 24/7, 365 to be a checks and balance against your IT infrastructure? This is the best thing. So if you ask, at very high level, C-suite level, you say, are we protected? You want the independent metrics to say, we are actually protected. Here's the metrics to back up that we are actually looking at the environment and running that checks and balance against the environment. So if IT says they're secure, prove it. Third-party independent audits and scanning, continuous monitoring as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. So we're almost at the top of the hour. Great information here, and just wanted to leave our contact information for everybody on today's webinar, so please feel free to reach out. As I mentioned, we will be sending out the recording and the slide deck hopefully later this afternoon. So any questions after you review that, certainly reach out to us, and we'll be happy to help from all angles here. And again, as a reminder, please fill out the survey after this webinar, and if you are looking for your CP certificate, we will issue that 30 days from today. So I think that's the end of the program for us today. Thank you everyone for participating, and thank you everyone for attending, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.